Have you seen that girl that everybody says I used to be? Have you seen that girl? Where along the way did I lose me? Have you seen that girl? I played that song and repeated those lyrics over and over in my head during the summer of 2015. It was my voice when I felt like I had literally and physically lost mine. There were days when I went to speak and no words would come out. And there were times when I looked in the mirror only to see a stranger. I lost myself. I lost my mind. I lost my faith. Or at least my version of faith at that time. As a mental health campaigner, I've talked openly and continually about the impact of mental illness on my life, physically, emotionally, and mentally. And it's really vital that we do. But it's also had an impact on me spiritually. And it's not lost on me that it's something we don't talk about often enough. At least 20% or 1 in 5 of us will struggle with a mental health issue or illness at some point in our lives. And great work has and is being done to raise awareness. But silence and stigma still exists. And I feel that the greatest silence still exists in churches and faith communities. Mental illness tore my world apart. It ripped what I thought was a firm foundation of faith from below my feet. And despite the desperate places that mental illness took me to, losing my faith was perhaps the worst and perhaps the hardest. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future. So life is worth the living just because he lives. 5 months into my 2.5-year battle with mental illness, I stood in a church as a band played that song. And my legs threatened to crumble beneath me, so I ran. And as I ran, I realised that I did not believe that anymore. I didn't want to go on. I didn't want to face tomorrow. Life did not seem worth living, whether God was there or not. That felt like failure. I had failed God and failed faith. And that failure felt final. And instead of providing comfort in the midst of mental illness, my faith fostered fear. You see, I imagined God was angry, disappointed, or was punishing me. I reckoned he had abandoned me. And I was so desperate to find absolution that many times I tried to confess every sin I had ever committed in the hope that that would be a fix. It wasn't. The treatment I needed was medication and therapy on a long-term basis. As I recovered, I began to relook at faith, and I realised that I had spent years believing that I had to strive to please God. And when that wasn't possible, which, let's be honest, it often wasn't, then I had to at least appease him. And both of those were mainly achieved by Bible study, prayer, attending church, engaging in worship, service, and evangelising others. None of those I could do when I was ill. Some days it took all I had just to get out of bed. So when I lost the ability to do for God, to please or appease him, I believed I had lost faith. So slowly I have been putting things back together. I've been asking what faith is and who God is, and I'm still learning. But what I've come to be sure of, or as sure as I can be on the days that I still doubt, what I've come to be sure of is that God cares deeply about every circumstance and season of our lives. Pain and illness are not a mark of judgment. I believe that stilling my anxious heart and fearful mind in silence with a cup of tea matters just as much to him as the quiet time of Bible study and prayer I beat myself up trying to achieve. But those often aren't the messages we get from the church. And too often the messages we do get do more harm than good, with overused cliches at best and bad theology at worst, both producing rotten fruit. I believe the church must be actively involved in the area of mental health and well-being, and we want to be part of the conversation as to how and why. So let's start listening and let's start learning together.